and welcome to Be More Burt, the podcast celebrating lives lived differently. Why Burt? Well, it's because we're brought to you by Burt's Bees, the natural skincare brand whose founder, Burt, was a pioneer of the good life. Burt's Bees encompasses everything we want to champion in this series, doing more of what makes you happy, building connection and community, and inspiring you to tread your own path. I'm Pandora, and I'm a journalist and broadcaster and your host for this series. For this episode, I'm so excited to be joined by Elizabeth Uviebinene, founder of the journaling app Storia World, author of 5 books, and a columnist for Grazia. Elizabeth, I'm so pleased to be speaking with you again. The last time I interviewed you was for Slay in Your Lane, which feels like it was the beginning of this huge creative journey. You've done so much since then, but let's start with that book. What inspired you to co-write Slay in Your Lane with Yomi Adegoke?
It's been such a long time. So I was working in a corporate workspace and I was obviously a young Black woman and I wasn't sure exactly if I wanted to be in that environment. And I looked at my boss and I was like, am I going to be allowed to thrive in that sort of like very restrictive environment? I was the only young Black woman in that, but I was young as well. I was the youngest person in the team. So essentially for me, it was asking the world questions around where is my place within this corporate structure. I didn't really see many people who looked like me in the leadership team. So I started to question if this is the route that I wanted to go down. And alternatively, at that point, my best friend Yomi she's a journalist and she was working at Channel 4 and very different environments, but we were encountering challenges that we attributed to being, young Black women in very different spaces. So we decided to work together to essentially not only focus about work, but talk about the different parts of what it means to be a young Black woman navigating different spaces in Britain. And I think what really made the book really special wasn't just our voices. We were able to kind of bring other very influential Black women and who are much older than us as well, as a form of like mentorship and guidance and asking them essentially how they slayed in their own lane.
The book was a success and it obviously changed both of your careers. It cemented you as a thought leader. And you've since written 4 more books, which must be, is that a book a year?
It's book a year. I was going for
You're
that
gonna keep this up?
It's like Serena Slam, she's just got her, five, she's got more than 5 slams, but you know what I mean. So I published like 4 books after that. And I definitely didn't go into writing books as something that I wanted to do. It just naturally happened. And we've done things from, publishing a children's book called The Offline Diaries around friendships, to I published a book in the midst of lockdown called The Reset, changing how we work and live. So things have just kind of snowballed into really, really big things.
So all the books you've published have been non-fiction books?
Apart from one, Offline Diaries, which is
the
a children's
Offline
book.
Diaries,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
And do you always have an idea up your sleeve for the next one?
Always.
So you know what the next one is now?
I probably know the next 5.
God,
but I don't.
amazing.
You know what? I think it's because I'm just always inspired, and I'm very curious. So I'm always asking questions of the world and my place in it. And I think I'm inspired by people. So I've always, and I'm inspired by people's stories and my experiences and the challenges that I experience as well, my friends. So there's always like a book on this, a book on that. But I've kind of just taken a step back from doing that at the moment and just trying to. They always say in order to write well, you have to live. And I felt like I was just writing and publishing and not living.
And is that where Storia app comes in? That's part of the living life. Tell us a little bit about the app that you launched.
So I'm building a journaling app that helps bring people together, which is quite unusual because journaling is something you do quite in solitary and you're just doing it by yourself. It's a very individual pursuit. But when I was kind of looking at the stats around, loneliness and the lack of community that we feel and the fact that we are living in the most, loneliest era, but we are meant to be very connected, but we feel very disconnected.
Yeah.
And what I believe around the power of journaling, it can help us belong with our own personal narratives and our stories. And there's something really beautiful around that because you're able to foster understanding and empathy. And I really believe that the world could do with much more empathy and understanding amongst people. So our approach is really about bringing people together. If you're on this app, you're on there for a reason. It isn't just like I think other social media spaces have become a town hall. And I think with Storia, it's much more of a home. And when people say, what's my, really grand vision, with Storia, it's the, wherever journey you're on, there are others as well. And you can seek inspiration from that as well.
Obviously, the tech startup scene can be a pretty difficult work environment.
Yeah.
There's all sorts about that. Do you feel like your work and your learning through writing Slay in Your Lane has prepared you for a very male, white industry?
I wish it did. I think my corporate background has prepared me more because there's a lot of masculine energy and it's very different. There's not a lot of black women who are running tech startups or building. I also was able to raise money for it, which is very difficult for, if you look at the funding landscape, like black women get literally the crumbs. So being able to raise money for this idea was amazing. But it's a very different space. And I always say one of the main differences between the publishing space and the startup scene is in publishing, you are positively reaffirmed every day because you've got, how it goes, you've got your editor who tells you your work is brilliant. Everyone's very much behind you. However, in the startup scene, you're kind of met with a lot of resistance. People will tell you why you can't do something.
Or why you don't need that app.
Exactly.
Right, yeah.
We don't believe in this. Or are you the right person to believe in? Are you the right person to bring this to life? Or it's very different. So you have to build a level of conviction about the vision and why you're doing it. And it's most the difference for me, because in publishing, you're reaffirmed positively, but in startup scene, it's very male dominated and it's very so it's much more like, you can't do this.
You have to kind of reaffirm yourself. Do you look at Slay in Your Lane though, and you feel really proud that that's where all this started?
Absolutely. I think that when we came up with the idea, when we were just like, fresh graduates in the workplace, would never be able to imagine that we would be the impact that we had. I'm going back to my old workplace on Wednesday to deliver a talk, and it's just so there's loads of full circle moments. But I think impact and just delivering value has just been the central thesis around the way I like to work. So yeah, definitely, and I've always just had this feeling of, for me, I don't really care about the visibility that comes with things. It's the impact that I like to focus on. So when I'm on a train, I see someone with our book, or I don't really care if they're like, oh, you're the person who wrote it. I just care that you're reading it or you're interacting with it.
And so cool to sit out in the wild.
Yeah, always.
Elizabeth, you really encapsulate the Burt's ethos of if you can dream something, make it. Do you have any advice on starting and building your own company?
I think that building a company is very, very difficult. So you have to have a level of conviction in why. And that could be, I think there should be a better this or that, whatever it is. So I think you have to start with your why. You have to have a real personal conviction about why you are doing this, why you are getting up every morning to put yourself through a lot of stress sometimes. And, when things don't go your way, you need that resilience to kind of push through. So being intentional about what your why is really, really powerful. And your why is really important as well when even if for your customers, for investors, for your team, everybody needs to be singing from the same hymn sheet. And it's never going to be because we're just building an app or you're building a lipstick or whatever it is. It's about what's the greater purpose. So I think that's really important. I also think that you have to be curious, because curiosity leads to questions, leads to insights. And you really have to understand what is it about the way you see the world that is going to ladder up into a change in the way people behave, the way business is done. So I think that you really have to be lead with insights. So I think that's really important. And finally, don't allow fear to stop you. It looks like everybody is very fearless, but that's not reality. I think if your dream isn't big enough, if you're not scared, your dream isn't probably big enough. So it has to scare you a little bit. But when you feel that, you have to push through by just having courage. I don't think I'm the most oh my God, fearless person, but I am courageous. I use my voice and I use my mind in order to create things. And I think it comes from, well, if no one's doing it, well, I will. And I think that's always been the thread in terms of the way I've created. So don't be afraid to push through the fear, have courage, but ultimately don't be afraid to be seen trying, because everybody's trying.
Do you think it's really important to have failures along the route? Have you tried to build, obviously Story is an example of success, but is there anything that you've tried to build and had to go, you know what, this isn't working?
Absolutely. And life's a journey, and it's all about the lessons you collect along the way. It's not about the destination. I think we're sold the destination through a lot of different mediums.
Yeah.
And even like fairy tales when we're young, it's all about what happened at the end. But we forget that there's like, you know, the trials, the mishaps, the errors, you know, there's always those are the things that really make you who you are. When you're at a dinner table and you're doing small talk, like, reality is, it's the things that will connect you with someone are the things that you're probably not speaking about, which are the lessons that you've learned along the way. Because what I'll learn along the way will be a story that I'll be able to share with people, either through a book, whatever medium. Maybe in 5 years' time, we'll do this again, and then I'll be telling you something else.
That'd be good.
So it's just a lesson, and I think for me, it's all about the regret of not trying. So
you think you would regret not trying more than you're scared of the failure?
Yeah. So one of the stories that when I raised my money earlier this year, there was this issue with the banks. So the bank that I was banking with, it got bailed out by the government. So at one point, lots of like startups funds just literally went missing overnight. So the money was in the
Terrifying.
account. Yeah. So the money fully came into the account on a Wednesday evening, and then my investor called me at like Thursday morning, just saying that there's issues with the bank. I would suggest pulling out the money. Wasn't able to do it in time, and then by Friday, you just weren't able to access. And I remember thinking, yes, and it affected like loads of startups in the UK as well as in America. And I remember thinking, oh my God, I've been a CEO for like 5 minutes. That's sad. Like, I remember thinking, oh my God, that's really annoying. But I think
it's good book title though, The 5-Minute CEO.
Oh my God. Do you know, I've always said that's how I'm starting my next book. It's going to be 1 minute there was money, and next minute there wasn't.
Yeah.
And then I know how I'm starting. We don't know how it's going to end up. But I remember thinking, being annoyed not because of my own personal need to build this business, but because I felt, well, stories should exist. Even if I don't build it, it should exist. So I definitely think that, you have to, it is that feeling.
It's a clarifying moment.
Yeah, it really was a clarifying moment. And it kind of was just like, well, I'm going to try. And depending on how it ends up, like, I'd rather have, said that I built something. And people always say, as long as you're using your own product and you really believe in it, you're using it every day, then that's the most important thing. Build something for your friends, start with one, and many will come.
We'll chat some more in a sec, but before that, I'm going to take a moment to share the love story behind Burt's Bees. Along with his partner, Roxanne, Burt didn't just pioneer a natural skincare company, he pioneered a way of life, the good life. He realised something: if you go your own way and make more time for what makes you happy, you'll lead a richer life. So he did just that, leaving his high-flying Manhattan job to live at one with nature. In the wilderness of Maine, he got friendly with some bees. Together, they turned beeswax into lip balms, hand creams, and more. Burt has shown us that if you love something, don't be scared to jump in, even if it can sting you. Because doing more of what makes us happy is what life is all about. We've been out and about asking you how you live the good life and do the things that you are passionate about. And here's what you had to say.
Like reading my books and just chilling. I like going climbing sometimes. You get a sense of achievement from it, which I think after uni, you don't get achievement very often in life and validation, so that's quite nice. I think it's like a good exercise for your body and also for your mind. Lots of the time, exercise can be a bit mindless, but with climbing, there's like problem solving and stuff involved, so.
I am a designer. I spend a lot of time just doing kind of passion projects, just designing, just like thinking of a random brand or business, just making one up and just designing whatever I want. And it's kind of like a nice creative outlet for me. I think it just like helps clear my mind really, especially because I'm like a creative person. I have like quite a lot of ideas like running through my head a lot of the time, and it's just a nice way to like kind of get them all out there.
Thank you all for sharing, and feel free to get in touch on TikTok or Instagram to tell us how you live the good life at Burt'sBeesUK with the hashtag #BeMoreBurt. You also have a bi-monthly column in Grazia.
Yes.
Which, again, I think really encompasses what I was mentioning earlier, how I think that you really speak about creativity, but you also speak about business. You're very pragmatic in your approach. As someone who people come to for advice on confidence and career building, what do you do when you have a wobble of confidence? Who do you go to? Do you reread your own columns?
Yeah.
Or do you have like your network of go-tos, people, places, things to get you back on track?
Absolutely. No woman is an island. Behind every amazing woman, there are
10 more great women.
Exactly, behind them. Their moms, their best friends, and whoever it is. So definitely, I think when I feel like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? This feels very overwhelming. Definitely phone call to my best friend. It's like we will end up talking about, life and men and just dating, just whatever it is. And then it grounds me. I think you have to be very intentional about the things that ground you. So for me, going on walks, speaking to my best friend, and also just, I know it sounds really, this is why journaling is, being able to just kind of look back. So I'll go through my journals, either like the ones I've written years ago or the ones I have on my phone.
Them all?
Yeah, I really do. And I look back and I was like, oh my God, I actually thought the world was going to end at this point. It didn't. Okay. And we move on. So I definitely think that in order to kind of move forward with things, when you're having that wobble, you have to be reflective and look at where you are now and how far you've come. Because when you're on the internet for a bit too long, you will feel as if you're not enough, because there are so many different things going on in terms of like everyone's killing it, so you feel like a bit alone. And I think that that's why I'm building Storia, because I really believe that like there's a real belonging crisis. I think that understanding that everyone's going through a journey is something that, we're presented a lot with the finished product, and we don't realize that there are so many trials, tribulations, errors, self-doubt, lack of confidence along the way. So I think that being able to come on an app that's like this and say, well, I'm an entrepreneur, I want to build a business one day, and being able to connect with other people and understand their insights, where they are today, is super powerful. So it's just, really important to kind of ground yourself, make sure you have a network of people who know you, and look back at how far you've come.
Your output is prodigious. I wondered, how do you avoid burning out?
I think that everyone's version of burning out is very different.
And bandwidths are really different, I've come to realise.
Yeah, and I think as well, just being honest with yourself, because I think that we use burnout a lot of the time these days as a way to describe feeling anxious, feeling depressed. I think it's become a euphemism for, some of the feelings that we actually feel, because I think we can accept, oh, I'm feeling burnout. So it's kind of like, it feels more the umbrella, and then under it there's all these different things that we're actually feeling. And it's even though we would like to feel like depression is something that is way more spoken about and more accepted, I think yes. However, I think there are still barriers, because when you tell someone you're depressed, people don't know how to sometimes react. I've noticed that culturally we use burnout as a real umbrella term to describe not feeling just 100%.
Yeah.
So I tend to, I think for me, burnout comes down to apathy. That's like my telltale sign. When I can't be bothered, when I feel just like a lackluster of life, that for me isn't a nice, I always say it's when I feel like a sim, when I'm just doing things on autopilot and I'm just like in the motions, and that's just not me. Like I like to be enthusiastic. I like to feel like, I like to be passionate. And when I just feel like, just getting through it, doesn't feel like me.
What does do more of make you happy mean to you? I mean, I think it sounds like you're quite good at doing more of what makes you happy. What do you reckon?
Doing more that makes me happy. Using my voice. I think that in speaking up and standing up for myself, so what that looks like is not being afraid to challenge the status quo, to kind of look into the world and say, well, why doesn't this exist? Who is like, I think that's always been something that makes me happy. I worked in environments where things didn't make sense, and I would just be like, why are we doing it in this way? Like, what's the process? And when someone says to me, because it's always done that way, it always leaves me unsatisfied.
Yes.
So yeah, I would say doing what makes me happy is really about asking questions, being curious, because like that's for me is, because if I'm not asking questions and I'm not curious, then I'm a little bit like living life on autopilot. Like I want to be like, oh, why is it like that? Ooh, like, do you know what I mean? So doing more that makes me happy is really about being curious and using my voice as well.
What advice would you have to someone who says, you know, I want to ask lots of questions, but I'm seen as difficult when I do? How is there a way of asking those questions, or is it just about knowing that you've got every right to ask those questions and that curiosity is a strength, not an inconvenience?
That's a very good question, because that's something I'm still adjusting to myself in a different scene. So I've got a developer that I've hired, and sometimes I'm not technical, so I don't understand the intricacies of like certain things. So the two things I do when it comes to being curious and asking questions that making sure helps the other person feel comfortable is leading from help me understand. When you kind of lead from like, oh, help me understand this, help me understand, it's not like, why isn't this? Why it doesn't feel as defensive.
That's a very good tip.
Yeah.
This phrasing, I think, is everything, isn't it, in communication like
100%.
that?
So it's very much help me understand. Like that's something that I've had to be more intentional about when I'm asking my developer, you know, a particular question, so he doesn't feel like, oh God, she's on my neck. So there's that. And taking people on the journey with you. I remember I used to find things very difficult when I was like a graduate, and one of my bosses said to me, the reason why you're finding doing your work very difficult is because you're not taking people along the journey with you. So in order to kind of ask questions and getting buy-in, it's getting like presenting your challenge in a way that's like, this is how I'm seeing things, and taking them along the journey around, well, this is where I would like to be. How can I help you be better at what you're doing?
To finish, we're asking all our guests what living the good life means to them. What does it mean to you?
Living the good life means being intentional. I think that being intentional in how I show up around like my friendships, my business, and not living life on autopilot. I think it's really important for me to feel like I am in the driving seat of my life and not a passenger.
I love that.
Yeah.
I find I'm going to go and journal it.
Yeah, I love it. I've got so many bits from you as well, so you're going to find yourself in my journal as well.
Good. Thank you for listening to Be More Burt, the podcast all about celebrating lives lived differently. And thank you to my guest today, Elizabeth.
Thank you for having me.
Keep listening for more episodes. They're all available right now, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get a sec, please give us a follow and a like. And of course, we want to hear from you. If you would like the chance to win a year's supply of Burt's Bees, tell us how you live the good life by sharing your story with us on TikTok and Instagram at Burt's Bees UK using the hashtag BeMoreBurt. For terms and conditions and all the info, head over to www.bemoreburt.co.uk. See you next time.